irrational, what is supernatural, what is beyond the norm. This is not irrational, it is something beyond the norm, just what is said. There is one creator who is the creator of everything and creates that which is customary, and the creator who created this universe in its vast complexity, the one who created this universe in its vast complexity, has the power to create things which are not customary to us. There's nothing that contradicts reason. What's irrational is, for example, someone claiming that a square is a circle. This is irrational because the two terms, they are contradictory by definition. So that's irrational. But believing in matters beyond the senses, this is not something irrational. Now, the prophets, we believe in their message because Allah gives them miracles. Miracles are extraordinary matters that are performed by men who say they are prophets. They happen the way that they say that they will happen, and they cannot be matched or outdone by an opponent. And Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he performed a multitude of miracles. Imam al-Bayhaqi, he wrote a book, the meaning of the title, The Proofs for Prophethood. And in this book is actually a series of volumes. I believe it's 4 or 5 volumes. So many miracles were reported about the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now, again, the materialists may say, oh, well, those are just wives' tales or fairy tales or fabrications. Some of the miracles, not all of them, but some of the miracles of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam were themselves transmitted by mutawatir. They were mutawatir reports. For instance, the water springing from between the Prophet's fingers, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This was a miracle of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that was witnessed by a multitude of people, over 1,000 people, and it happened more than once. But on one occasion, more than 1,000 people witnessed this miracle, and it was mass transmitted. Or the crying of the tree trunk. The Prophet used to give, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he used to give the speech, the khutbah in the mosque, and there was a tree trunk. He would stand next to the tree trunk. And later the companions built a platform, a minbar, from which for the Prophet to speak, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And when the Prophet Muhammad was on the minbar giving the speech, the tree trunk started making the sound of crying. And this was witnessed by a multitude of people in the masjid. So the people, they reported this, and many other miracles. And then when you look at all of these miracles, and when you know about the hadith, the science of hadith, and how the events of the life of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam were preserved and transmitted, you look at all of these hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of miracles being reported from multiple chains of transmission, sometimes with 2, sometimes with 5, sometimes a multitude of people. The reasonable person doesn't say, well, I think all of these people, they were all liars. Especially when these people themselves, they have a reputation for not lying, being very, very, very careful about not being seen as liars. So it's the honest person would recognize, accept, well, these events must have happened. Or at least he would be honest enough to admit that at least some of these events happened. But for the materialists / atheists, a lot of them, they are, Allahu Akbar, Allah made their hearts like stone, very, very hard-hearted and not open-minded. Because they're not, the ultimate objective for them is not to seek the truth. The truth is that there's a creator who owns us, and we should submit to the creator. That is not, as they say, on their agenda. So when you bring up, or if one mentions to them the matters of the extraordinary, that they tend to reject it out of hand. And this is not showing someone who's really a genuine intellectual in truth. The Muslim scholars, you will find that they were intellectuals, people of vast knowledge, people of very strong memories, people who could examine and analyze things, people of reflection. And also, it wasn't like, as they often portray the intellectuals of the West, that they may use their minds, but you often find that their personal lives are a mess. Alcoholics, drug addicts, serial fornicators. A lot of them you'll find go insane. You find, mashallah, with a multitude of the Muslim scholars, they were people of wisdom, of deep and profound knowledge and intellect, and at the same time, they acknowledged and recognized and knew about the deep levels, deep oceans of spirituality. So, mashallah, the Muslim world historically, we're not talking about the madness we see today, but historically, the Islamic civilization produced very, very well balanced people. Very well, historically. And again, I'm not talking about so-called ISIS or the ignorance that is so prevalent in the Muslim world today. But historically produced outstanding scholars who were very well balanced people. So let's go back. That the prophets, they prove that they are prophets by performing miracles. Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he did a multitude of miracles. Some of his miracles were transmitted by mutawatir, by the mutawatir method. So that leads us to conclude that this man who says he's a prophet, he is calling people to the rationally consistent belief in God, that there's one creator who exists, who does not need or resemble anything, that the creator is beyond all that we can imagine, cannot be imagined. So he's calling people to a rationally consistent belief in the creator, because the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam did not call people to worship him. Some people, they call, say, Muhammadanism, and they think that Muslims worship the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and this is not true. But rather, the Prophet is calling people to the proper belief, the rationally consistent belief in God. So, and he has, even before the advent, before the start of his prophethood, before he started receiving revelation, he was known for his impeccable character. For he was called Al-Amin, the trustworthy, even before he started to receive revelation. So he had a very good reputation amongst his people. So the reasonable person would say, well, this man, he's doing these miracles, and he's calling people to believe in one God who doesn't need or resemble anything. He must be a prophet. He is a recipient of divine revelation. So a prophet may tell us something, or when a prophet tells us something, meaning for us now we received it through chains of transmission. But when the Prophet told us, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, meaning the Muslims, that there is a day of judgment, that there are angels, that one must, in order to fulfill their duties to the Creator, they must, for instance, fast during the month of Ramadan, that they must avoid drinking alcohol, that they must, to fulfill their duties, to avoid the sin, to avoid the sins and do the obligations, that the person must avoid fornication, that the person must avoid stealing, that this person who's telling us this message, that we must follow him. And this is another point that's important to flesh out. When we look at the Western civilization, especially now because it's become very secular, that they make laws, and they say that, well, these laws are to be followed, and if you don't follow their laws, of course, you face the consequences. And I'm not advising people to go out and break the law, but I'm just saying that they impose laws upon people, but their sense of right and wrong is not based on anything consistent. So you find that certain things are considered legal in one decade or in one period, and then later that which was legal becomes illegal, that which was illegal becomes legal. Like, for example, the case with homosexuality. 50 years ago, the overwhelming majority of Americans, for instance, they regarded homosexuality as an abomination. Now, 50 years later, that the person who does not accept that behavior is considered a pariah, somebody who should be marginalized and pushed to the fringe of society. So within basically a little bit, say 2 generations, a behavior went from being considered an abomination and being repulsive, it went from that status to a protected and by the legal system, or in the, let's say the culture, the pop culture, that is regarded as something honorable and something noble. So this means that the value system is not based on anything. Now they will, sometimes you'll hear the secularists, they will say, well, we believe in progress. But ultimately, what are they progressing to? if for one to progress, that means there has to be a clear objective. Because just change itself is not progress. Because you don't know, are you moving towards your goal or away from your goal? If you were traveling on the highway, you're traveling, you're moving, you're going 70 miles an hour, you are moving. The fact that you are moving does not mean that you are progressing towards your destination if you don't know where your destination is. So for these people, often that you will find the materialists, the secularists, they are attacking Islam because of certain rules in the religion. They're saying that this is offensive or this is wrong, but on what basis? And if you investigate, and this is very important for Muslims, because a lot of Muslims, especially those who are in the high schools and universities, they tend to try to argue and defend the religion without really understanding the mindset of those who are making attacks against the religion, when they attack the religious practices. So you need to flip the argument. You need to reverse the argument and show that those who are attacking Islam on different aspects of the sacred law, that those who are attacking Islam, they don't have any sound standard. That which they consider bad today, Allah knows, in 10 years they may consider it something good. That which is considered good today, in 10 years it may be regarded as something bad. So their morality or their sense of standards is constantly changing. And this is not the way the Muslims, our religion is not based on that. Furthermore, that the secular law, and again, I'm not telling people to go out and don't go out and go and break the laws of the society because they will harm you. But the secular law does not take into consideration the consequences of what happens to the human being after death. The secular law only tries, in theory, to address the well-being of humans in this world. And it does not address the well-being of the human beings after death. So even the very nature of that law is limited. For example, the Prophet ﷺ said for the man to touch the skin of the woman that is forbidden for him to touch is like getting struck in the head with an iron rod. If a person touches the woman who he's not allowed to touch religiously, he doesn't immediately get struck in his head with an iron rod. He may not even feel any pain, he may feel pleasure from it. But he doesn't know the reality of the consequences of his behavior in this life regarding what will happen to him in the afterlife. This is something that is beyond our senses. So part of the knowledge that the prophets come with is the knowledge about not only how to conduct our affairs in this temporary life, but also that our conduct, what to do in this life, how to conduct ourselves in this life so that we will be protected in the afterlife. So keep this in mind when you're dealing, for say this in particular for young people who may be in academic settings. If you get into debates about Islam, first of all, make sure you know the issues and how to debate. Don't just try to defend the religion and you're ignorant, because often that makes the situation worse. But keep in mind that their line of attack about when the seculars talk about what's right and wrong or good or what is just and unfair, that you have to look at what is their frame of reference. And then you expose that their frame of reference is not sound to start with, is not valid to start with. So keep that in mind, inshallah. So another source of knowledge we said is the reliable report, and among that is the prophetic report. So we know, for instance, about the interrogation of the grave, that people will be questioned in the grave, because the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ told us about it. It's a reliable report, even though it came from one person, because this person is a prophet. And he proved that he's a prophet because he did miracles. And among the characteristics, among the attributes of the prophets, is that they are always truthful. They don't lie. So this is a source of knowledge. The reliable report is a source of knowledge. One of those types of reliable reports is the prophetic report, and the other is the mutawatir report, the mass witness and mass transmitted report. So we've mentioned two so far, the two general sources, the sound senses and the reliable report, and the third source of knowledge is reason, using the intellect. One of those sources is intuition. Now, intuition has two meanings, but let me qualify the meaning here. Usually now people use the term intuition and they mean a feeling, sometimes they say a gut feeling, a sense about things. That knowledge is not a certain knowledge. Like a person may come home from work and he senses that his wife is upset. She didn't say anything, she didn't make any gestures, but he gets a feeling that she's upset about something. This is an intuition, but this is not a certain knowledge. She might not be upset. So this is not a certain knowledge, but people use intuition with that meaning. That's not the meaning we mean here. Intuition here meaning a knowledge that is known without having to reflect, not having to reason through. For example, that the part of a given object has to be smaller than the entirety of that given object. For example, you have a pizza. Any single slice of that pizza has to be smaller than the entirety of the pizza. So this is something that's known. Once you understand the terms being used, you don't have to sit and go through a series of steps. The part is smaller than the whole. This is something known by intuition. You don't have to reason. You don't have to go through a series of steps. So that's one source of knowledge. Another of using reason. And another is deduction, where the person will start from a premise and he works, or two premises, and he works to a conclusion. I give an example, inshallah. If somebody were to say that Dallas is large, and talk about in population, that Dallas is larger than Memphis, and Memphis is larger than Chicago. Those statements, if true, Dallas is larger than Memphis, and Memphis is larger than Chicago, then by necessity, that Dallas would be larger than Chicago. This is structurally right, it's not factually right. But if we just put it in simple and abstract language, if A is bigger than B, and B is bigger than C, then by necessity, A would be bigger than C. The sound argument is it is structurally right, and the facts are true. Meaning, for example, to say that Chicago is bigger than Dallas, and Dallas is bigger than Memphis, therefore we know that Chicago is bigger than Memphis. This is structurally, it's a sound argument, and it is valid, meaning that it is also true. So this is a way, using reason, deduction, what's called deduction. Using deduction is a source of knowledge. So in summary, regarding the sources of knowledge, there is the sound senses, there is the reliable report, and we broke that down into two categories: the mutawatir report, the mass witnessed and mass transmitted report, and also the prophetic report. And then we said the third source of knowledge is the use of reason, whether it's from what is known intuitively, with the meaning that it's something that the natural intelligence recognizes it immediately without having to process it, or what is known by deduction, what we just mentioned in brief. If A is bigger than B and B is bigger than C, then by necessity A must be bigger than C. So alhamdulillah, we'll stop here, but this is very important to understand this lesson, because the use of reason is part of our religion. And it's not, as we said earlier, in the Western tradition, you have this ongoing conflict between religion and reason, or faith and reason, or faith and science. And in our religion, the use of the intellect is a necessity. We have to use our intellect. The intellect is the means by which one can discern truth from falsehood. And as we see as we've seen in the series or the lecture, the atheist delusion, we find that the atheists in reality are not using reason properly. They are not using reason properly. They make a pretense to use reason, but they don't use it properly. Alhamdulillah, the way of the Sunni orthodoxy, Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, that we are a balanced people. We believe in the use of reason, and at the same time we believe in the unseen.